Hi everyone, this Mometrix review video is all about 19th century British politics. And for the three of you who are still watching, I promise it's actually going to be fun. Really. And I might even do a British accent. Wait, what? I'm not allowed to do that anymore? Ugh, whatever. Let's get going. Anyhow, let's start at the beginning of the 1800s. Great Britain adds Ireland to its union, which meant that the United Kingdom now consisted of England, Scotland, and Ireland. But hold on. Through the Acts of Union, Irish representatives would now sit in the House of Lords and the House of Commons, the legislative portion of the British government. Yet, many Irish boroughs, or small counties, were left out of this process, which, as you can imagine, made them less than happy. Am I allowed to do an Irish accent here? No? This all took place under the tenure of Prime Minister William Pitt the Younger, the youngest Prime Minister ever. He was 24 when he took office. Under his guidance, the abolition of the slave trade gained momentum, and eventually the trade would be abolished by the Slave Trade Act of 1807, the year after he died. At least it happened, right? Also, during this time, France was rising from the ashes of revolution and had new leadership in the form of Napoleon Bonaparte. Ha! I got my accent in. And I'm not going to say it the normal way. Napoleon wanted to expand the influence and domain of France to what it had been during the reign of Louis XIV. But the British were like, nah, bro. And numerous battles took place in the continent and at sea following Britain's declaration of war in 1803. These Napoleonic Wars continued until the Battle of Waterloo in June of 1815, which resulted in a largely defeated French force and the eventual exile of Napoleon. And as if Britain didn't have enough going on there, they were also at war with, you guessed it, America. The War of 1812, a creative name that, lasted about 3 years from 1812 to 1815 and revolved around the land and water rights north and south of the former colonies. Basically, it was squabbling over the Canadian borderlines, fishing rights, and American expansionism. Native American tribes were funded by the Brits to keep the growing American nation at bay. And they also impressed, or made join the Navy, Americans who were born British. Obviously not cool if you don't want anything to do with fighting against the French in Europe for a country that you don't even belong to anymore. Now, on to one of my favorite topics, monarchy. God save the Queen! No, won't say it normal, and we're just going to move on. So during the century, there were only 4 British monarchs. King George III, who by this point was crazy, senile, depressed, or some combination thereof, had his son rule as regent. Basically, this is done when a crowned monarch is not able to perform daily duties safely or in right mind, or is just too young to do so. In 1820, George III died and his son became George IV. And he led an extravagant lifestyle that ran up the debts of the nation already struggling to keep a balanced checkbook after multiple wars. His coronation party was 20 times more expensive than his father's had been. He became massively obese and was known for adulterous relationships. Political satirists had a field day with his overly indulgent lifestyle and lack of political prowess. George IV would only reign for about 10 years, and his final years were spent in pain and duress from tumors and physical maladies. Ugh. George's brother, William IV, succeeded him on the throne and carried a very different temperament. William worked far harder than his older brother, and Prime Minister Arthur Wellesley is said to have done more business with William in 10 minutes than he did with George in 10 days. Not great. The political environment that William entered upon his coronation, or even before that officially happened, consisted of 2 factions of very opposite convictions. He was immediately caught between the reformers and the traditionalists. Prime Minister Arthur Wellesley, moved not to change anything, or at least be really, really careful. But America and France had had their revolutions that radically changed the formation of government, and Parliament argued that more people needed to have better representation and the right to vote. That doesn't sound so bad, right? This led to the passage of the Reformed Act of 1832, which meant a few things. 8 English counties and 3 Welsh counties each received an additional representative. Yorkshire, which was represented by 4 MPs before the act was given an extra 2 MPs. 22 large towns were given 2 MPs, another 21 towns, of which 2 were Wales, or at least were in Wales, were given 1 MP each. So, quite a change. And for a while, people didn't love King William because they felt he represented the old ways of tradition too greatly. Other notable events during his reign include the abolition of slavery, which happened right after he died, the Factory Act, or child labor law, the Poor Law, having to do with the homeless and poor of England. William IV endeavored to live past his niece's 18th birthday so that she might not have to reign as regent, and having succeeded, he died 1 month after she turned of age. Thus, in June of 1837, Victoria was anointed and crowned queen. But seriously, from here on out, all of 19th century British political history becomes Victorian, so it's a pretty big deal. So now to cram in 60 years of political history into the next minute. Are you ready? The Victorian era is typically associated with reform and progress. Shortly after being crowned queen, Victoria proceeded with the marriage which had been planned since her infancy, because arranged marriages, to Albert, Prince of Saxon, Coburg, and Gotha, which were various parts of Germany. Just trust me on this. The two were happy together and would eventually have 9, count them, 9 children. In politics, Victoria presided over 20 changes in prime minister, which I'll not bore you with now. But I do want to talk about the industrialization that occurred during the Victorian era, as it influenced much of the politics and reforms. In 1838, London-Birmingham line opened, and the railway boom began. Uniform postage. The system was a mess, prone to abuse, and so 1-cent stamps were standardized for any letter going anywhere. Soon, nearly 350 million letters were sent annually. Vaccinations were made available to all children, even the poor. Interchangeable parts became popular on manufacturing. In 1881, electric bulbs became mass-marketed. Paper became mass-produced, as did pencils. Metal replaced wood in shipbuilding. Bicycles were popularized. Telegraph lines connected all continents except Antarctica, because Antarctica. The increase of policies meant to help the poor, protect workers, and improve the lives of many continued throughout Victoria's reign. England enjoyed relative peace at the height of its influence, though the Crimean War and Indian Rebellion of 1857 were exceptions to this. The Crimean War was to prevent Russia from annexing parts of the Middle East, while the Indian Rebellion was due in large part to the poor management and oppression on the part of the East India Trading Company, which was dissolved after that. After about 20 years of marriage, Victoria's husband, Prince Albert, died. This was likely from typhoid fever, and she fell into a few years of depression, during which she relied heavily on a Scottish manservant named John Brown. This has continued to be speculated upon and discussed, and even is the subject of a movie. But I'm not going to spend time on what didn't or did happen because we just don't really know, since the Queen's journal of it was burned. And there you have it, the political history of 19th century politics in Great Britain, in under 10 minutes. At least I think so. I'm not wearing a watch. Anyhow, thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe, follow us on social media, and check out our other videos right there. They're just click the button.